Today, my return to Soweto fills my heart with joy. At the same time, I also return with a deep sadness, with a deep sense of sadness. Sadness to learn that you are still suffering under an inhuman system.
Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them. Through his hard work, unchallenged, Nelson Mandela achieved greatness. If we follow the logic of that extraction from 12th Night by British best cultural expert William Shakespeare, who somehow influenced Mandela to become the world's most honored human being. A cross-check of Mandela's life tempts someone to quote Thomas Hardy in The Mayor of Casterbridge that happiness is an occasional episode in a general drama of pain. A general drama of pain in reality because Mandela spent 27 years behind the bar to make sure in this world where we are, everybody has equal rights, not for himself, but for the globe. And that was the real sense of Mandela's martyrdom. Sure, the best example of egalitarianism has gone. So what happens to a world without Mandela? Simply put, what happens to South Africa without Mandela? The South African High Commissioner to Cameroon, Zanele MAKINA, welcome to Globewatch.
Thank you, Chang. Thank you for having me here once again. I'm honored to be on Globewatch.
Ghanaian poet who died during the attack in Kenya this year, Kofi Awono, once wrote a poem entitled Songs of Sorrow. I would just like to read an extraction of it. What is the wailing for? Somebody is dead, Agusu himself. At last, a snake has bitten me. My right arm is broken, and the tree on which I lean is falling. End of quote. When you heard Mandela is dead, somebody you knew so well, is this quotation feeding well your emotions?
It touches a part of my life, for sure. It's the first time I hear these words from this beloved poet. But I must say that indeed the snake of death has cut off something from my life as an embodiment of South Africa, the nation.
So what was your immediate reaction the moment you heard, as a former provincial chief of the ANC, at least for the women in South Africa?
I am still struggling, Charles, with the reality. And I'm also struggling with the exact words that can describe how I feel after President Mandela died, after I saw the announcement and I heard that President Mandela has passed on. The strangest of all feelings for me is that on the one hand, I did expect that President Mandela would be gone. He had been gone from the stage of politics since 1999. But to really think and to be hit by the reality that indeed he is gone, it still becomes very clear that nothing could have prepared me for the departure of such a great man. I wake up in mornings, I think of, is there a best eulogy that can ever be paid to President Mandela? Many things come, many visions, many memories from the past, many meetings that we were once honored to sit with him. They flashed through my mind. The only thing that I was thinking, for example, this morning was, I am so thankful to God for him and his generation and Mandela's generation to have allowed us to step into his generation and to be honored to live in the age when God brought him to us.
You are talking about a generation issue. The current generation of 20 years after the end of apartheid certainly did not know Mandela when the struggle for liberation was going on. What has been the key legacy he's leaving for the South African community and the world at large?
Probably freedom. Freedom of expression, dignity of humankind, belonging, national belonging to South Africa. I always joke with my children, the ones that were born after 1990, the youngest one, we always joke with him that, oh, you were born free. We call him a born free. But the reality is that they may not be aware how profoundly the sacrifice of President Nelson Mandela has influenced the South Africa that they've been born into.
People always say Mandela was and is the best example of equality, justice, social cohesion, peace, reconciliation. Is that statement really justified?
It is. It's very justified. I was thinking again this morning about President Mandela and how he managed. He's a man from a village. I was honored also to be there in Qunu when he retired and we prepared a celebration. I was honored to be part of the preparations of a celebration when the community of Qunu received him back and also his installation as a chief of the rural people. I was bemused this morning as to how he could live these lives interchangeably. A gentleman, a world leader, a statesman, a chief in the village. Now, the contradictions for me come in the fact that he had to grapple with these things and pull all these strings together in order for him to be able to make sense of the world that he had to lead and to live in. I was thinking about that particularly as a woman in South Africa and also as a woman in the African National Congress Women's League. And you must remember the African National Congress was a congress of African men who for a long time had so taken for granted certain entitlements to themselves as men. And they were forever, continuously trying to make sense of what freedom was. And President Mandela, and I think also his dear brother Oliver Tambo, made a statement that a world where women are not free is not free.
You are talking the world of where women are not free, the society is not free. Mm-hmm. And people always quote Mandela everywhere as the best example of reconciliation, forgiveness, knowing the way he treated the white minority community in South Africa after apartheid, the history all of us know. Mm-hmm. But people find it so difficult that Nelson Mandela was unable to reconcile and to forgive his wife, Whitney. As a woman, when you see the way Whitney was treated, divorced after, do you have a feeling like Shakespeare said in King Lear that somebody can say that Whitney was a woman sinned against than sinning?
President Mandela forgave Whitney.
By divorcing her?
Well, forgiveness is not time-bound.
Okay.
It is the value of forgiveness that becomes very, very important. Did Nelson Mandela divorce Winnie Mandela? I would say yes, in terms of legally. But if you look at who has been speaking on behalf of the Mandela family when President Mandela was sick, it was Mama Winnie Mandela. Even after they were divorced, I just want to sketch a picture of the great man that President Mandela was. And I was being honored to know him and also to know Winnie Mandela very closely. In the conference of the African National Congress, where President Mandela was handing over the baton, the last tenure as president of the ANC and president of South Africa. In that conference, I'm sure many people who were there, like myself, they have this emotional picture. When the elections were happening for the new leadership, President Mandela was sitting on stage with his old committee. And then when the new committee gets ushered in, the new committee has got to, he receives them, but the rest of the committee that had been sitting on stage has got to step down to allow the new leadership to come in. And Comrade Winnie Mandela was one of the key, was elected in that conference again as a leader and with a resounding majority. When Winnie Mandela walked onto the stage, President Mandela walked straight to Winnie Mandela and they hugged for a long time. When President Mandela went to sweep Winnie and hug her, at that point in time, the applause could not stop. We were crying and dancing like children of divorce. We felt like children of a broken marriage. But it was the beauty of the character of President Nelson Mandela and the beauty of a couple that we never wanted to be apart.
Absolutely. Mandela was beautiful. You heard world leaders across the springboards, from Barack Obama, French President Francois Hollande, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Myanmar opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi, those who are involved in the liberation battle with all the good adjectives you can imagine on planet Earth, even those who insulted and called Mandela a terrorist. Did you sense an element of hypocrisy in their statements?
A little bit. Not all of them, but let's say change of heart. To be fair to them, I think people do change their hearts. They do see a new perspective every day. But indeed, those that had insulted President Mandela and had counted him for nothing, maybe they had to have a change of heart when they were faced with the reality of who Mandela was. And probably also a sense of inadequacy in themselves as human beings with their ability of not being able to grasp the issues of the world correctly.
I know that at one time in the South African Parliament, there was a debate during the apartheid government whether black Africans were really human beings. Do you think today in South Africa there is really that social cohesion that Mandela sought for?
South Africa as a nation is struggling and striving to be a nation. It's not an easy road to walk for anybody, but we have given freedom even to those that thought that were animals. They got freedom. The struggle for liberation in South Africa was not only for the liberation of the black men, but for the liberation also of the nation of South Africa. I also was reflecting on that, exactly on that issue this morning, Charles, and the only thing I could say was that we are free. And the person who's not free today in South Africa is the person who is struggling to make sense of the fact that we are free.
Let's talk what happens next to South Africa without Mandela. Some pessimists say that this is a society which is heading to polarity because one of the key figures of the anti-apartheid period, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, says he's no longer backing the ANC. You have another key figure within the ANC whose wife has now formed a political party, Ramphele, if I pronounce it. Ramphele. Good. You have somebody like Julius Malema, one of the prolific young men in the South African politics today who has taken a different course out of the ANC. And you have Nelson Mandela's king, who is equally saying he's backing out of the ANC. Are we heading for what we missed in the 1990s bloodshed for change?
Absolutely not. Firstly, let me just say that as much as we honor all these people that have chosen a separate path from the African National Congress, that's exactly the beauty of the ANC. The ANC was not struggling to be ANC. It was struggling to free. It was struggling for the freedom of choice, for the freedom of expression in South Africa. So Bishop Desmond Tutu made a choice, and that's his choice. Mampele Rampele made a choice guided by her conscience. That's exactly what we respect. Bloodshed, no. That's exactly what we... Bloodshed from whom? Because the ANC can never attack people who choose to form a new party. We were very clear as the African National Congress that we are struggling for a multi-party, a free and democratic society, non-racial, non-sexist. It will be foolhardy of the African National Congress to be resentful of a Malema who decides to form economic freedom fighters. The ANC would also have been very arrogant to think that it was all and would be all. And by the way, with due respect to Bishop Desmond Tutu also, I'm sure he should be thankful to the ANC that he could make that statement.
Okay. Some people think that Mandela without South Africa without Mandela would look like Zimbabwe. You know, next year, 30% of land is expected to go to the black majority community. And you know very well that the backbone, the survival, and the fitness of the South African economy is managed by the white bourgeoisie class. Mm-hmm. If we have agrarian reforms like they took place in Zimbabwe, in South Africa without Mandela, it should be worrisome, right?
Not at all. The key word for you, that in the words that you've just said now, is black majority. And we are talking about 30% to black majority of South Africa. So isn't that also in itself a contradiction?
It's a reform which will gradually take its shape.
Absolutely, and it has to take its shape. I do not know why anybody gets worried when a black man gets empowered. I do not know why anybody gets agitated when South Africa chooses a course, and that course that is being chosen by South Africa is a course that is being chosen by leaders of South Africa that have been chosen by the majority of the South African nation.
Okay.
And I don't know why Zimbabwe also has got to be an insult to the nation. We are not afraid of being likened to any African nation for that matter.
Okay. Let's talk another burning issue before we go back to Mandela to conclude this interview. The issue of ranking South Africa in the world. Today, it is the second country in the world with the highest number of HIV and AIDS infections. 70% of South Africans below 35 are unemployed. Huge economic and social challenges for South Africa. Do you think that those who took over South Africa from Nelson Mandela are on the wrong track, including your current president, Jacob Zuma, who has colossal challenges of legal issues in the South African courts?
HIV and AIDS is a challenge, not only for South Africa, but for the world at large. The cure for AIDS has not been found. No country can claim that they have got solution for AIDS right now except through ARVs.
Okay.
The ranking of South Africa as number 2 on HIV, maybe the one crime that South Africa always commits is to be open about its statistics.
Even on those about insecurity, you know that South Africa is one of the most insecure nations on earth. But
Absolutely.
It's a very beautiful country.
Absolutely, one of the most insecure countries of earth, but the key word is one of the most. This key word is one of the most. The reality here, that we're dealing with is South Africa an open democracy and an open nation? And the answer is no. You can go to other nations, which I don't even need to mention, and you can check if they've got their AIDS statistics, and nobody will be able to tell you because they don't have the statistics, or if they do, they don't disclose them. About the question as to whether President Jacob Zuma is on the right track, absolutely he's on the right track.
I mean, the post-Mandela generation, you know that Mandela himself challenged Thabo Mbeki of doing very little to combat HIV and AIDS.
Well, it depends on the context. It depends on the context of the issue. I do not think you have time for us to deal with that matter now, only to say that it depends on the context of what was being debated at that point in time. But I can quickly say that the debate of AIDS in South Africa I have to couch it very carefully because I'm on TV. The issue of the debate of AIDS in South Africa it cannot be separated from the issue of the big multinational drug companies who would have expected South Africa to pay for HRVs in order for them to make money, to pay for the nation. And therefore, the budget of South Africa could not at that point in time be determined by multinational pharmaceuticals. And also, it also depends as to whose media was trumpeting that in South Africa at that point in time.
Let's go back to Nelson Mandela and look at him as a spirit man. This is somebody whose global influence is undeniable. 250 awards. Nobody has ever had that. Mandela, to some historical classification, comes only after Jesus Christ, at least for those who belong in the Christian realm, because Muslims will tell you that he comes after Muhammad. Buddhists will tell you that he comes after Gautama Buddha, or the South African traditional religions will equally tell you that he comes after their own gods. How did he succeed to beat all these records?
Humility. He was a very humble man. President Nelson Mandela would be surprised when you say these things about him. There's two things that makes a leader to be a great leader is humility. If any leader is not free from himself, he's still not free from his own ego. And President Mandela had laid down his ego. He hated two things. He hated arrogance, and he also hated flattery. He would never allow you to flatter him because you cannot tell him more about himself. He had to live with himself only in a cell for 27 years. So he's not looking for flattery because he had to contend with himself first, and he knows who he is. So he could not then entertain flattery. And President Mandela had made such sacrifices. We became part of his life. We imposed ourselves into his family. He could not have a proper family. He could not bring up his own children for the sake not only of South Africa, but for the sake of the world, for standing for his beliefs. Today, people are very critical of the children of President Mandela, and I always sit and think that, but we robbed him of his father, of their own father. He sacrificed so much in order for us all to be free. But definitely, President Nelson Mandela, that notwithstanding, is the most humble man that I've ever met. Leader, acclaimed in the world, but very much at peace with himself.
Mandela will be buried next Sunday. That will be December 15. And eulogies are coming in across the world with different words expressing different emotions depending on how Mandela influenced people. I'm sure that is going to receive a very sumptuous state burial from the South African authorities who are managing the country today. Mandela was a very simple man, you said, very humble. Do you think that if he sees the amount of money which is going to be spent for his burial, the coffin and all the rest, if he had the chance of deciding how he should be buried, he will regret the materialism which will be involved in his burial?
I wouldn't call it materialism. first and foremost. So even my departure from answering a question is completely different because I wouldn't call it materialism. You see, Charles, also
because his outfit was all that simple. Everything about Mandela was simple.
Absolutely, but then he was also the servant of a nation, and the nation has got to decide the befitting send-off that they have to give to him. I don't think President Nelson Mandela would be at odds with that. You see, President Nelson Mandela was not living to please any opinions. Because those opinions will be coming for people who forever think that we must always apologize for being who we are. Either you apologize for being black and apologize for being rich, apologize for being educated and apologize for being free. I don't think President Mandela stood for freedom. And he would have honored the wishes of his people. And we as the nation, we have decided to give President Mandela a send-off that is befitting to a man of his stature. And it is not materialism, it is the once-off that we can ever do for him.
The South African High Commissioner to Cameroon, Zandile MAKINA, thanks very much for accepting our invitation on Globewatch.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you.